a love of words, a love of what we writers can do with words. We can tell an engrossing story, create characters that we love and love to hate, make people cry or laugh. We can persuade and win our points, or write an angry tirade for our soapbox of choice. We can play with words, language acrobatics, jump words through fiery hoops, do tumbling and backflips. Compelling writing at the sentence level starts with comparisons, with figurative language. Want to improve your sentence craft? This episode can help. Welcome to The Right Focus, a podcast for writers, newbies and veterans, and everyone in between. We're hosted by Millay with the assistance of Remy Black and Edie Rooms, all from Writers Inc. books. Our focus is productivity, process, craft, and tools. Each episode lasts as long as it takes to fix a quick dinner, drive a short commute, or take a brisk walk. Resources and links are in the show notes. Visit us at therightfocus.blogspot.com. Now, on to this week's episode. First, a check-in, which we haven't done since the 1st of December. When writing long-form fiction and nonfiction, constant check-ins are a matter of word counts, not stages of writing. December was a break from the Right Focus podcast because the holiday season is busy, and my life in December is no different. We resumed our podcast on January 1st, as did my writing life. I committed to writing daily or doing something with writing, like this podcast, on a daily basis. That's a hard commitment. Life interferes. The brain doesn't want to spark. But as of the recording for this podcast, I've been writing every day except one. And that was the day my car was messed up and I was so discombobulated. Coming up with something to do for writing is particularly hard when the brain won't spark creativity. A good night's sleep, 2 cups of coffee, and sitting at my desk usually will ignite the spark. I've also started holding in reserve business days for those times when nothing will come. Business days include proofreading, formatting manuscripts, research for cover images and long emails to the cover designer, taking a course I think will help my writing, and promotions. Believe me, I stay busy. I have 2 accomplishments so far. First, in late December, I started a layout for a project planner for writers. I finished formatting and the PDF in early January as planned. Now the only holdup is the cover. When I publish, I'll tell you more about this project planner. I have a different one with a looser format and a different size also in the works. Layout, format, proofreading, and cover still to go on that one as well. My second accomplishment is a productivity course for writers. I'll put the link in the show notes. Everyone struggles with productivity. For self-directed and solitary careers, especially creative ones like writing and painting, or one-person small businesses, productivity can be a bane. Daily work sessions are vital. I'm on my soapbox. I climb off now. Time for this week's episode on enhancements with part 2 of Figurative Language. Last week, our focus was the easy comparison equations like similes and metaphors, synecdoche and metonymy. Those are similar. I'm comparing. We also discussed hyperboles, which are built on the simile formula. This episode explores the extended metaphor and its arcane-sounding metaphysical conceit, which English teachers and professors wield like a scary sword hanging over the heads of literature students. The metaphysical conceit is not as hard as they present it to be. I'll simplify it, I hope, enough for you to begin crafting your own, which is the only way to understand this word trick. Then it's on to the scary-sounding word Litotes, which is also simple. We'll close this episode with personification and its subcategories of anthropomorphism and apostrophe, the literary device, not the punctuation mark. We begin with a brief review. Simile. The sun is like a yellow eye watching the people tanning on the beach. The simile is actually a division of the metaphor. When teaching figurative language, teachers always start with the simile. The comparing words make it easy to spot and easy to create original comparisons. However, metaphor is the control idea. A simile is really a type of metaphor. For a direct metaphor, we say the sun is an eye. We call it direct because both sides of the comparison equation are there. This equals that. Nothing has to be assumed or inferred from the words or context. Some people might call this direct metaphor personification rather than metaphor. Personification, by its very name, requires that a thing be transformed into a person. Animals, including insects like bees and ants, have eyes. Therefore, the possession of an eye to watch, to see, to view, does not create an only person possible trait, which is the hallmark of personification. Therefore, it's an easy direct metaphor. The implied metaphor is a hidden metaphor, with one side of the comparison equation totally missing. The yellow eye watched the people tanning on the beach. The yellow eye, of course, is the sun. The sun is not mentioned except through the word watch. We have to infer what it is. Watching is not a personifying word. Animals, especially predatory ones, can watch. Now for extended metaphor. Simply put, it is a comparison which continues for more than one line of poetry or through several statements of words associated with the metaphor. This podcast series began with an extended hiking metaphor. The connecting traits of the comparison are used across several lines, whether those lines are in paragraph form or on poetic lines. Here's an extended metaphor by Edna St. Vincent Millay, tying together the entire poem, First Fig. My candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But all my foes and oh my friends, it gives a lovely light. The candle represents life, with the metaphor extended through burns and light. The brevity of the candle, and thus the brevity of life, is the second line, and can be an allusion to Macbeth's famous speech, out, brief candle. Here's another famous extended metaphor from Shakespeare, coming this time from As You Like It. All the world's a stage. You've heard that one, haven't you? All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. Shakespeare is not the first to compare life to a play, with world and stage as direct metaphors. People are players, actors, enacting many parts. Those many parts are different times of our lives, the different roles we play in life. Birth and death, which are our entrances and exits, and the divisions of our lives are the acts. Now, how does an extended metaphor become a metaphysical conceit? It's a special kind of extended metaphor. Don't let the words metaphysical conceit continue to give you heart palpitations. The word metaphysical merely lets us know that an object is being compared to some sort of concept. No biggie here. Meta equals transform. Physical equals the body. So we're transforming the body of the thing. It's the word conceit that becomes tricky. A conceit is an intellectual metaphor, a fancy comparison designed to show off the poet's intellect by using an elaborate or surprising extension. The two things being compared will be extremely dissimilar. Some definitions of metaphysical conceit use far-fetched to describe the surprising dissimilarity of the two compared objects. One of the most famous metaphysical conceits in English literature is from John Donne's A Valediction on forbidding mourning, and it occurs in the later stanzas. Let me read 4 stanzas to you. Our 2 souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion, like gold to airy thinness beat. If they be 2, they are 2 so as stiff twin compasses are 2. Thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but doth, if the other do. And thou in the centre sit, when the other far doth roam. It leans, and hearkens after it, and grows erect as that comes home. Such wilt thou be to me, who must, like the other foot, obliquely run. Thy firmness makes my circle just, and makes me end where I begun. What did he just say? Because we're contending with over 400 years of time passage and changes in the language. So basically he says, our two souls must part. No matter how far the line between us will stretch, it's still there, really thin, beaten to an airy thinness, but still there. We're like a compass. You're the fixed pointy end. Staying still, I have to wander out and away from you. You're still my center, no matter how far I roam. You keep yearning for me as I yearn for you until we come back together. That whole idea of we're a compass, that's sweet. He just had to go all intellectual on his wife, which is really a compliment to her brain. So their devotion to each other, the concept, is compared to a mechanical compass, the kind we once used in mathematics to draw circles. The compass has two legs. One is the pointy leg that plants in the center of any circle or curved line. The other, with its attached pencil, makes the outer edge of the circle or the curved line as it moves all around. So their devotion is like the compass. She's the fixed pointy center, the fixed foot. He's the moving leg that makes the circle around the center. His departure from her creates the breach or break between them, the expansion, in stanza 6. Their two souls are one, which is the joining mechanism at the top of the compass that allows the legs to open up and close. She remains at home and keeps watching for his return, following the destinations where he has to go, quote, makes no show to move, but doth if the other do, and thou in the center sit, in stanzas 7 and 8. She yearns for him when he is gone, because she leans and hearkens. He has to travel around, but remains always connected to her, always returning to her. Me, he says, who must obliquely run, and makes me in where I begun. It's her firmness, her devotion and love, that keeps him connected to her. Thy firmness makes my circle just. Returning to Shakespeare's All the World's a Stage, we can consider the whole of that long speech as a metaphysical conceit. It's elaborate and fanciful. In the speech, each act has its own elaborating details. We don't truly play multiple parts in our lives, and not many of us enact all 7 of those parts that Shakespeare mentions. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. Then, the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly with good capon lined, with eyes severe, and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange, eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eye, sans taste, sans everything. We often don't classify All the World's a Stage as a metaphysical conceit because it sounds too reasonable to us to be matched. It's not dissimilar enough. True examples of metaphysical conceits are Anne Bradstreet's The Author to Her Book, where the comparison of her book of poems is to a child she has birthed and is now releasing into the world, and John Donne's The Bait, where the lovely woman is the lure for all the fish in the river. A modern version of the metaphysical conceit is Richard Wilbur's The Rider, a poem written to his daughter, in which he compares her writing on the typewriter, like rowing through a tumultuous ocean, and then her creative spirit, like a dazed starling, trapped in the attic of her brain, and trying to beat her way to the freedom of the world. Once we figure out metaphysical conceits, implied metaphors no longer frighten us. Litotes comes to us from the Greek litos, which means simple or linen cloth, nothing special, and Litotes is the literary device of understatement. In class, we contrast understatement with hyperbole, which is like an overstatement, but they're not really comparable or contrastable. Anytime we've complimented someone with not bad, or we've said, I'm not unhappy, we've used Litotes. Here's 2 examples from the biblical book of Jeremiah. I will multiply them, and they shall not be few. I will make them honored, and they shall not be small. And from Beowulf, from about lines 1570. He raised the hard weapon to the hilt, angry and resolute. The sword wasn't useless to the warrior. Litotes itself carries the negating statement. Understatement presents something as much less in intensity, less in emphasis, than it actually deserves. Here's an insult from Churchill to join the ones from last episode. Churchill loved word tricks. This one depends upon removing force from a previous wartime threat. On 21 October 1940, during a radio broadcast to the French people, yes, to France, occupied by Germany since June 1940, with Britain supposedly the next country that would fall to the Nazi war machine, Churchill insulted Germany by saying, "We are waiting for the long-promised invasion. So are the fishes." German officers must have stomped about in tantrums after that broadcast, for German aircraft began the Blitz in the previous month, and Britain had not weakened, and never did. E. Cummings, in his poem Since Feeling is First, has one of those examples of understatement that only English teachers love, since only they truly understand it. Life's not a paragraph, and death, I think, is no parentheses. Understatement is not anticlimax, which builds through several sentences, only to yank the power away. When Tom Buchanan, in The Great Gatsby, shows the narrator Nick around his opulent mansion, with its Italian garden, its sweeping view of the seashore, and masses of roses, Tom says only, "I've got a nice place here." He actually has a wonderful place, a place that only the wealthy and privileged can afford. Robert Frost's Fire and Ice ends with a strong understatement. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if I had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to know that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. We cannot conclude our brief examples of understatement without mentioning the knight who challenges King Arthur to a duel in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Each time Arthur removes a vital limb, the knight claims that the wound is nothing, 'tis but a scratch, and a flesh wound, and he's had worse. When Arthur removes his last limb, the knight concedes. All right, we'll call it a draw. Monty Python used understatement for ironic effect, as Churchill does with his insults. The Gatsby understatement is also ironic. Tom Buchanan may not appreciate the magnificence of his life, which Nick Carraway can only admire, until Nick realizes how great wealth has skewed not only the upper class's values, but also morals. In life, rather than in literature, understatement is used when people wish to sound modest and humble. On to personification. English brought the word personify into the language during the Middle Ages, from the Middle French personne, itself coming from the Latin persona. In English literature, the persona is the narrator of the poem. To personify is to give human qualities to something, such as that tricksy lamp that wants to turn on sometimes and at others does not. It has an electrical problem, not an obstreperous personality. That is personification, giving human qualities to some thing. Those human characteristics are usually emotion or human clothing, or an action only associated with a human. Here's an easy personification example. We're back to the sun. The yellow sun frowned at the people tanning on the beach. In this sentence, while the others had the sun watching, just like animals, lions, will watch their prey, here the personification gives us the word frowned, because that word gives emotion. Officially, only humans have emotions. Yes, I know your dog cried. I know your dog's happy to see you come home. We have a number of expressions that depend upon personification. We no longer even recognize them as personification. Lady Luck will help us win. Luck is like a noblewoman with the power to influence the random fall of dice or cards. The heat beat us into submission, as if the heat is an overseer or a slave driver that beats the people under its control. See my car, someone says. She's a real beauty. We refer to cars and ships as women. The wind whispered through the autumn-turning leaves. Whispering is something only people do. In Wordsworth's poem, daffodils danced on the hillside. Dancing is also something that only people do. In Hey Diddle Diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the little dog is laughing, and the dish is eloping with a spoon. Emily Dickinson's famous Because I Could Not Stop for Death personifies death, not uncommon, because everyone has heard of the Grim Reaper, but this death has a carriage, and he welcomes the persona to come on a drive. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves, and immortality. Here's an example from John Milton's Paradise Lost. Earth felt the wound, and nature from her seat, sighing through all her works, gave signs of woe. It's not earth that's personified in this line. Any living creature will feel a wound. Nature is personified. She sighs, she feels woe, and she has a throne, which is her seat. Milton reminds us to be careful in creating and identifying personification. When human characteristics are given to things, we have personified. When things give their traits, John roared like a lion, we have a metaphor, or a simile in that case. We say John roared, we have an implied metaphor. When objects are made animate but not human, we have a metaphor. Robert Frost, my November guest, personifies sorrow as a charming yet temperamental visitor. I will emphasize the words that create the personification. My sorrow, when she's here with me, thinks these dark days of autumn rain are beautiful as days can be. She loves the bare, the withered tree. She walks the sodden pasture lane. Her pleasure will not let me stay. She talks, and I am fain to list. She's glad the birds are gone away. She's glad her simple worsted gray is silver now with clinging mist. The desolate, deserted trees, the faded earth, the heavy sky, the beauties she so truly sees. She thinks I have no eye for these, and vexes me for reason why. Not yesterday I learned to know the love of bare November days, before the coming of the snow, but it were vain to tell her so, and they are better for her praise. Anthropomorphism is often confused with personification. Examine the many definitions for it. It's hard to find a difference between it and personification. Some definitions do create a distinction. If a living creature is given human characteristics, that's anthropomorphism. If an abstract concept or object is given human characteristics, that's personification. Other definitions do not distinguish between these two, and usually personification is the only one that's mentioned. Anthropo is Greek for human. Morph is form or shape, thus giving human form to a thing. The rabbits in Watership Down and the protagonist Buck in Call of the Wild are examples of anthropomorphism, although Jack London worked very hard to give to Buck the thoughts that any animal would have. However, we do have touches of higher-level human thinking in the story. Children's books, the charming stories of Beatrix Potter, the Brambley Hedge series, the wonderful Wind in the Willows, are all examples of personification or anthropomorphism. Another special kind of personification is the literary term apostrophe. In apostrophe, someone dead or something is spoken to as if it could respond. The official definition uses the word addressed as if it were a speech, like the Gettysburg Address is a speech. Someone or something is addressed as if it could respond. Perhaps the most famous apostrophe comes from John Keats' Ode to the West Wind. O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? The persona speaks to the wind as if it has a voice and can respond. John Donne's Holy Sonnet 10 is loaded with personification and apostrophe. Death is spoken to, pitied, challenged, and questioned. Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou think'st thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. There in that first stanza alone are two examples of apostrophe. Death is being called as if it's a name. Charles, be not proud. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure then from thee much more must flow. And soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and soul's delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, and doth with poison, war, and sickness dwell. And poppies and charms can make us sleep as well and better than thy stroke. Why swell'st thou then? Yet another question directly to death. One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. That's all for this episode. Next week, we begin an explanation of the interpretive side of wordcraft with symbols, focusing on the literary meanings associated with numbers and colors. Symbolic words are easy to work into your manuscripts. Inspiration from this week comes from Tennessee Williams. There is no pleasure in the world like writing well and going fast. It's like nothing else. It's like a love affair. It goes on and doesn't end in marriage. It's all courtship. Williams is right, isn't he? When we write well, with skill and imaginative creativity, we remain in love with wordcraft. Thanks for listening to The Right Focus, a podcast for writers at all levels, hosted by Millay from Writers Inc. Books, assisted by Remy Black and Edie Runes. Our focus is productivity, process, craft, and tools. Music is licensed through Audio Jungle, called Background Music Loop. Its creator is Alexander Polishchuk, known on Audio Jungle as Plastic 3. The music comes in different iterations. Show notes and resource links for this and other episodes can be found at therightfocus.blogspot.com. Write to us at winkbooks@aol.com when you have questions, comments, and speculations. We will try to answer you as quickly as possible. By the way, we will not mind your email address. That's rude. If you find value in our content, share with your writing friends or write a review. We're small beans here without the advertising budget of the big peeps, and you can make a difference. And whatever occurs, write on. A love of words. A love of what we writers can do with words. We can tell an engrossing story, create characters that we love and love to hate, make people cry or laugh.